Welcome, everyone. My name is Karima Akila, and it is my absolute privilege to be with you today for the From Nothing to Anything, a celebration about deschooling and unschooling. Today, I have the absolute privilege to be with some of my most favorite people in the entire world, especially in this world of unschooling and deschooling, starting with my good girlfriend. And first of all, if you don't know what that term means, let me tell you. Okay, there's girlfriend, then there's good girlfriend. Okay, it's the next level. My good girlfriend Robyn is here with us today to kick us off with her keynote address on the topic of deschooling. So we'll be here for 2 days. The first day, we're going to talk about this thing called deschooling. Robyn's going to kick us off, and then we have an amazing lineup later today. Everything from, well, what exactly is deschooling, and then, well, how do you unschool school subjects? Like, how do you do that? To what is decolonized parenting? Like, what does that really mean? What does that look like? All the way to how do you define success? Plus some other stuff that I'm sure I forgot. So, as means of an introduction, please let me introduce you to my friend Robyn, my good girlfriend. Let me tell you who she is, and then we're about to mix it up. So, Robyn Robertson is an unschooling mom to two kids, podcast host, business owner, and public school board trustee. Robyn, her husband, and their two kids started their world schooling journey. Didn't even know that was a thing, did y'all? World schooling journey in 2012. During this time, Robyn watched curiosity and excitement for life grow in her family. Two things stood out to her. She noticed that less time in school did not equal less learning. In fact, learning seemed to be more meaningful outside of school. She also saw their family's bond strengthen. Her experiences traveling while home educating had Robyn questioning her past beliefs around parenting, how we learn, and the education system. It also highlighted the need for community. This led Robyn to launch her podcast, Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids, which is a platform to share ideas, stories, and information about the joys and challenges of home education and self directed learning. The podcast also serves as a place to bring together a collective voice for change in the broader education system. Today, Robyn advocates politically for home education and self directed learning. With her experience and trustee position, she bridges the gaps between the homeschool community and local educators. She combines that experience, knowledge, and curiosity in her mentoring, working with families to help them envision and create their own unique learning paths. Now, you can find my good girlfriend Robyn through her website, her podcast, and in her community, Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids, on the Clubhouse app or on Facebook and Instagram at Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids. Without further ado, please let me give to you my good girlfriend, Robyn. Thank you for being here, Robyn.
Thank you for having me, Karima. Everyone can still hear me okay? Hear me well? Yes? Okay. Okay. I forget that I don't always talk about my trustee work. I actually see that I have a fellow friend and trustee in the room today. So it's always an interesting part of that journey as well, because usually I'm in these platforms speaking about just unschooling and self-directed learning, but there's always a lot to learn for me in every way. And I find I learn a lot in that position and role as well. So thank you everyone for being here today. I definitely want to thank Miss Karima, such a wonderful person. Thank you for organizing such an amazing event with wonderful speakers and topics that are really so important for this community, whether you're new to unschooling, you're new to homeschooling, or you're a veteran unschooler. I think these are still important discussions to have, and it's an important place to build community as well. So you heard, my name is Robyn Robertson. I live with my husband in Northern Alberta, Canada, and we live with our two teenagers that are unschooled. And we've been living a life of learning now for over 9 years and counting. And I say a life of learning outside of the mental and physical walls of the classroom. I think that's probably the easiest way to describe it. And over 9 years ago, we decided to pack it all in, that those boxes that we were living in, and leave our home and travel with our kids. We left the city. We actually decided to move to Jamaica, where my father's father was and that side of my family is. And we moved in with my dad for a while to try something new. I'm also the host of Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids, which you know, which is really a place I wanted to start because I had all those questions like Natalia was asking today. And I know the questions that you guys have. And I knew other parents had those questions. And it was an important place, I thought, where it can be a hub for all those questions. So, how do my kids really learn? Are they learning if they're not in classroom and they're not learning the curriculum? What will they be able to do if they don't go to school? Like, what kind of opportunities are they really going to have? What if I don't teach them? What are people going to say? How am I going to explain my days or our days to other people? What if all those what ifs? How can they get into university? Will they go to university? What if they fall behind? What if I'm not capable? What if I'm not enough? What if I'm not smart enough? I'm not PhD'd enough. I'm not degreed enough. What if I fail my kids? I think that's the biggest fear that we hold on to in this, right? What if I fail? I'm responsible for the lack of opportunity and failures. So that podcast was a contribution to the community, and events like this that Karima's created is an extension of that as well. And I do want to let you know that I'm not here today as the resident expert that's conquered deschooling, that I have it all in the bag. And now I've been awarded the A+ and the gold badge that I should be wearing today as an unschooler. I'm not here for that because that's actually not me. I'm still in the process of deschooling, and it's been 9 years and counting, over 9 years. And what I call is we are living our process of building our unschooling garden. And that's the best way for me to look at it. And I used to say that I'm in the process of living in the unschooling trenches, but I realized that living in the trenches is not the best way for me to describe it. It's not a fit. We are not planning warfare. Our family is not unschooling to be at war. What we're trying to do is we're trying our best to learn how to be better gardeners of our own life learning journey. And that's how we look at it, as a garden that is sustaining, that's natural and nourishing. And today I come to you just to share those experiences, to be in conversation and community with you and share experiences of our deschooling journey and the experiences of challenge and acceptance and trust that we've been going through. So like I said, I'd like to make today as interactive as possible. If you want to ask questions, if you'd like me to expand more on things, I'm more than happy to do that. I want to be engaged together in community for this. So from nothing to anything. I think Karima's a wordsmith in that. From nothing to anything is probably one of the best ways that I've heard to describe not only unschooling, but also the deschooling journey. And to me, it's simple, but strong, but has many layers within it as well. Because when we think about it, in so many ways, we've been trained to think and believe that nothing is not good. We're trained to avoid nothing at all costs. Our society says that we don't want to begin from nothing. We don't want our kids to be doing nothing. We want to fill in those gaps. We want to fill in those holes. We want to add activities. We want to add curriculum. We want to make sure that they are here, that they're there. That does not mean doing nothing. Nothing is not acceptable. And the biggest thing is we certainly don't want our children to start from nothing. Then who are we as parents? So from nothing to anything, it definitely provides opportunities for sure. But usually we want, like for nothing, we want more. We want all those opportunities. We want it more. We want it all. And being in a place of nothing can definitely feel uncomfortable for many of us. And I think that's the first part. That's the first step, is being comfortable with nothing. That's the first step in deschooling, because deschooling is really a change. It's a shift. It's a challenge that goes against those beliefs and norms and acceptance of nothing, of nothingness. So maybe first what we can do is break down deschooling a little bit more before I share some of our stories. So deschooling is a change process. I think that's the simplest way to explain it. And we all go through changes. That's a natural part of life as well. It's a reculturing. It's a time of redefining what learning, childhood and education means to you, means to your children as well. But specifically, it's stepping away from those norms and beliefs and mandates and constraints that come with school or with the institution of school. So when we think of deschooling, D is the prefix in that word, right? D. I'm going to use, I know Karima loves Merriam-Webster. She's usually invited to a lot of our parties. So I was looking into chatting with Merriam-Webster, and she breaks it down really well, for sure. So D is the prefix before schooling. Schooling is the verb, schooling, and that. So usually if you have D in front of a word, DE means to remove it, to deactivate, to get rid of, or to reverse it, doing the opposite of. And then schooling, when you have that verb schooling, it's to teach or to drill a specific skill or knowledge, to discipline, to habituate something, to educate in an institution of learning. So with the DE in front of schooling, we're in the process of reversing that verb of schooling. And that can be uncomfortable, right? Because when we're working through something like an institution, the institution of school, that's a pretty big set, fixed entity in our world. So being uncomfortable with that is absolutely normal. And we would think, why would we even want to go there? Because when we think this is such a central theme to this conference, deschooling and unschooling, two words of this conference that are talking about undoing something, unraveling something. So that's our challenge today. And I know if you're here, most likely you're in that process of questioning, unraveling, deactivating, maybe something you've gotten to a point where something is going against your true values and beliefs. Something's not working or hasn't worked for you or for your children. And you're ready to shift. You don't want to just accept it anymore. You don't want to just keep going along with it. You're ready to be in a process of change, and you see that something different needs to happen. And that's what deschooling is. It's the process of change. Because if change is needed, why continue to do the same thing that's not meeting you or your children where they need to be? Why repeat and plan to repeat what's already not working, especially if the outcome you want is different as well? So over 9 years ago, my family was ready to try something different. And we were really just at a point in our life that the choices that we were living and making were not working for us anymore. It looked like it worked on the outside, but on the inside, it wasn't. We had been living abroad for a long time. We had moved back to Canada. We wanted to grow our family and kind of really just settle into the life that was expected of us. We got often, why do you have to live in a far off place? Why can't you just come home and be like everyone else in the family? And, all those things, do those things that are expected, get a job, get a house, get the vehicles, do all of those things that you should do, right? Fit into that matrix that everyone else has mastered except for you. So we thought, okay, maybe it's time for us to do that. We'll come home and we'll live where we need to, we're expected to live. We will do all those things that we should. And once our kids are old enough, we'll put them in school. And we started essentially just checking off the boxes. And we were so busy checking off those boxes. But here's the thing, we got really good at checking off the boxes. But what happens when you get good at checking off those boxes is those boxes, once they're checked, they don't go away. You don't get this stamp that says, okay, you checked off those boxes, now you're good to be you. Now just go and do your thing. What happens is those boxes multiply, right? Those expectations increase or they shift in certain ways. And, if you want to check off those boxes, that's absolutely fine. The ask I have for you is just be clear on what those boxes you've chosen are. Because what became difficult for us is that we began to see that those boxes that we were working so hard to check off, they weren't actually boxes and expectations. Oh, I hear a dog.
find that whistle. I can't find it.
I'll pause for a moment here. If you have the dog barking in the background, can you mute your mic, please? I'm not sure who it is. Okay, thank you. Thank you. If you want to ask a question, no problem. Just maybe just give a moment to your dog. Dog is done barking. That's not a problem. Okay, so we were busy checking off those boxes, but those boxes, as we saw, as we checked them off, we realized, okay, we started looking at the sides and the tops and underneath, and we saw that all those labels and those postages that were listed on those boxes were not us at all. They didn't fit us at all. So before we wanted to check them, we started to look at what we were checking off. And the other thing that was happening is that the sacrifices that we were making were far outweighing any of the rewards that we're getting for checking off the boxes. And on top of that, we realized that what we had started doing as our kids were getting older is we were just handing off those boxes to our kids to check off. And so it was kind of like, if we're so tired of checking off the boxes, why are we now expecting our kids to learn to check off those boxes, especially boxes that just said, when you check it off, this will prove that you're better, or to show someone else that you're this, or that you're, better off for someone else, when it really wasn't fitting them at all. So one of the things that we did was to take our kids out of school, really because we wanted to travel. We were missing a point of connection in our family, and school was just something that we saw that didn't fit with our plans for travel. We didn't know about unschooling. We didn't know about deschooling. I had no idea about any of this. I knew some families that had homeschooled, but if you asked me about unschooling or deschooling, those would have been words that have been way out of my vocabulary. Like, I would have had no idea what you were talking about whatsoever. And of course, what I did was I replicated school at home. Or on the road. I had those classes set. I took all of that work with us. We had the alarm so that my kids did math a certain time of day, then the alarm went off. They did reading, they did writing. And then when that went off, then we could do those other things. But the thing is that we weren't happy, and that's why we wanted to make those changes. The biggest thing is that we were disconnecting and we were struggling in so many ways. When we began our family, what we wanted, we had dreams and values that were important to us. But with the busyness, we were slowly letting go of those dreams and values. I woke up, got the kids ready for school. They were busy, had breakfast. I got ready for work. We went to school. I went to work. We picked them up. We had those activities. We came home. We made sure they were fed. We went to another extracurricular activity, made sure we get home in time for bed and bath and sleep and all those sort of things. We woke up the next morning and we repeated it. Rinse and repeat. And on the weekends, it was almost the same. There was extracurricular activities. There were places we had to be and go, and everything was no time. It was a rush. It was no time for connection, no time for establishing those relationships. I remember I had one Friday off of work one day, and I was running late. I had the day off, but yet I was running late. So I was rushing the kids, and I was, they were out the door trying to get hair combed and all that sort of stuff, and trying to get everyone to school on time. And I was literally, like, once we got out of the vehicle, pushing them, making them run towards the school door. And my daughter slipped and fell. And she smashed her face, her chin on the curb of the walk. And it, of course, split open. She was bleeding and crying. So I pick her up and I bring her into the school and I take her to the bathroom to clean up. And the bathroom is across from her classroom that she was in. And as I'm cleaning her up and she's crying, and her teacher saw and heard and came over into the bathroom to see how she is. And as I'm cleaning her up, I'm asking her teacher, so do you think she's going to be okay? Do you think she can still go to class today? And her teacher looked at me and she said, no, you can't send her to class. You have to take her to the hospital. She's not going to class today. And I remember thinking, oh, okay. I patted her up and I took her to the hospital and she got stitched up, and I took her home because I had a day off, and we sat together and I just hugged her and we connected and we had time just to be together. My daughter was 3 years old at the time. And she was attending a full-time academic junior kindergarten program in school. 3 years old, that I was pushing her and rushing her to get into that school door and asking her teacher if she could still go to class after she smashed open her chin. And I thought, why? Why am I pushing this? Is it that important that after this she spends a day in school? When really we had one of the best days that we had had together, when I stopped to slow down and take that time to just be with her. Why is this so? Why am I holding on to this so much? Is this really the opportunity that I want to create for her as well? Because what was happening is we were busy trying to match, everyone around us and everyone that we thought had everything and anything, but what we had was a lot less. We had less time. We had less slowing down, less time for our kids, less time for our relationships, less time to reflect on what we were doing and how we felt if we measured up and where that really, really came from. Less time to reflect on the choices that we were making. And I realized that that's first where what we needed to do is we just needed that space to reflect on that time, some space to let go of that rush. So you'll hear a lot of parents talking about the deschooling process. And in the beginning, how the deschooling is about like having an open day, not planning anything, not filling in that time, not rushing, not scheduling, having time for free play. Because really the deschooling process begins with slowing down. And it's beginning with accepting a place of change, of where change needs to be. The deschooling process is not another chance to make a checklist of activities that we could be doing to go through the deschooling process. It's a process of stepping away from those checklists and slowing down and just taking a moment to ask, what do we really want? What's important for us? What do our kids really want? And why? Why? I like to think of it as, we're swimming in this ocean. In a way, we're referred to as a school of fish. There we go, school again, right? But of course, we need air. We're fish that need air. Maybe we're dolphins or another mammal or creature instead. So we're swimming along in this school, and we get a chance to come up for air. Maybe we move back and we slow down from everyone else that we're with, and we come up out of the water. And we look around and we see, it's the first time that we get to see that maybe that land that we're all swimming to is actually an island. It's not a big mass of land. And as we surface and we look around and we get a chance to get our bearings and see where we are in the ocean. And as a school is swimming by and we see it's not just one island, but there's actually multiple islands all around us in different directions. And we're actually able to go to those other places. It's not just that one piece of land that we have to go to. Maybe the current is going to be a little bit different. Maybe it might be a little bit farther, but maybe some of those other places might be a better fit for us to be and to live. But in order to get to that space, to see where we are in that ocean, we actually need to stop swimming first. We need to slow down. And that will be a slow down for different parts of our own lives as to where we are. But before anything, that process of slowing down is what we need to do so that we can have the space to look around. We can come out of the water and see where we are in that ocean right now. So you might be wondering why I'm kind of telling you the story and I'm not talking about all of those steps in deschooling yet. It definitely relates, I promise, because the biggest thing is laying that foundation, right? That foundation of how the major deschooling work began for us. And it really began in that place. It didn't begin when we started homeschooling, actually. We knew we had to change things up because we were expecting different results, but we were still doing the same thing. But what we really wanted to do is regain our freedom, our sense of adventure for our family. And the biggest thing was connect more with our family, to have that space and time to slow down and to be together, because those life choices at that time was not connecting with those values that we had for us, for life, for parenting, for childhood and learning. So that's where our deschooling process began. It wasn't in the homeschooling stage. It wasn't when I realized that my kids were still learning and even more joyful and enthusiastic during those times where we were done our schoolwork, the afternoons that they were just playing, how, all of that those other things that I was starting to see, that wasn't the start of the deschooling process. That deschooling process started even before we decided to leave, to travel, to start homeschooling, because that process was the time when we took time to slow down and to ask where we were and what we wanted and why. So deschooling is an important part of the life learning journey. I definitely think that it's, whether we try to avoid it or not, all of us will go through it in some way. And it can look different for us because we're all at different places and spaces in our life. It can look like sleeping in and taking long naps throughout the day. It can look like a lot of free play and time. It can look like Lego scattered all over our floor for months on end for a full week. It can look like a messy kitchen and our kids playing and building and creating. It can look like ditching the curriculum. It can look like us just doing a little bit along the way until we feel more comfortable. It can look like walks outside. It can look like a break from the structure of school in all different ways. Really, the biggest thing is about creating space. So today, I'm not going to give you a checklist of all the things you need to do to have your deschooling done and out of the way. I'm not going to give you a time frame because, to be honest, I am still in the deschooling process and it's been over 9 years. And I have my oldest is already transitioning to be out of the home and I'm still deschooling. I think I'm deschooling more now that my kids are teenagers than ever more than before. So, but the one thing that I can do, or a few things that I will give you today, is that creating space is always a great place to get to. Because deschooling, remember that D in front of the schooling is about removing and letting go. And so that might mean removing the checklist that school has habituated into us, or removing certain things that we think have to happen. And there are some other commonalities as well, because it's a change process. It's not a simple journey. And I know maybe I'm not bringing some great news to you today, but it's not simple. It's not. It is messy. It is challenging. It can be difficult. It's not a straight linear line. And its messiness and nonlinear messiness can be what gets us into trouble, because we want that linear line, right? We want that order. And deschooling, any change process is not order. It's not linear. But the thing is the experience of messiness is necessary to discover the hidden benefits. So there's a great quote, and actually I love taking the irony of, and I talk about this with a lot of families that I work with, the deschooling process as a change process. There was a lot of information. A lot of times I get a lot about unschooling and books that have nothing to do with unschooling. And one of the ones that I read is a book that's all about school and education. And it's from this professor at the University of Toronto who's known for his work in education and public school. But as I read his book about change, I was like, wait a minute, he's using it in the context of changing schools, but this is totally the deschooling process. He's just taking, flipping it into a different direction. But I was like, this is exactly the process after all of the families that I speak with and that we share together. This is the process that we've go through. And he says, transformation is not possible without messiness. Creative ideas and unique solutions are often generated when the status quo is disrupted. And it's true, because so many times we have to disrupt the status quo for things to happen. So what do? We want to make the checklist. We want the how-tos. We want the resources. We want the activities. You want me to tell you right now, get your pen and write these 10 steps, and I'm going to give you where you can go, what website, what link, and you can print out this PDF and you're going to have it, put it on your fridge and follow it for the next month, and then email me and let me know where you are. Right? I see a lot of people nodding their heads. I want that too, right? That's exactly what we want. But this is where it's hard. It's not about the checklist. The goal is not to innovate the most. What happens with deschooling and this unschooling journey, because it's not linear and it's complex, instead of making a great checklist, our goal, our commitment is actually to solving complex problems. That's what the process is about. It's about developing the capacity to solve complex problems. And what happens in this journey of deschooling, unschooling, homeschooling, this journey of learning about ourselves and our kids and our family on a deeper level, those complex problems that we see are our relationships. Relationships with our children, relationships with our partner, relationships with our parents, relationships with ourselves. And it's the relationships that actually we probably didn't have time for before. The relationships that when our kids were spending 6 hours in school, we were removed from because they were with somebody else. It's the complexity, it's solving complex problems that is the important part of this process. And absolutely, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna have a moment after to read this question in the chat as well. Absolutely, it ebbs and it flows. There's going to be good times, there's going to be difficult times. It's going to, we're going to feel good, we're going to be happy, our kids are going to be joyful, we'll be okay with where we are, we're going to be okay with them no longer doing the reading workbook. Yes, we put it in the garbage, it's done, we can move on. But then our friend comes over with their kids who are the same age as ours, and they talk about all of the reading lists that they completed for the summer, all of the things that they've done and where they are. And we worry, wow, they're 8 and their kid has already read 20 books and done this test and worksheets, and my child is barely reading. Now what? Where am I? Am I wrong? Am I failing? What's happening in this process? So we're going to have it's the implementation dip. I see Tyra is here now. We've talked about the implementation dip, and that is normal. It happens when we bring in something new, when we're encountering a new innovation. There's going to be peaks and there's going to be valleys and there's going to be dips. And part of it is appreciating those dips, because those are the important times of deschooling. Those are the times where we're uncomfortable. So we're like, okay, so what do we need to ask ourselves? What is uncomfortable for us? Where are we? We're going to feel anxiety. We're going to feel fear. That's absolutely normal when we're bringing on something new. We might feel confused, overwhelmed, cautious, and we might even feel deeply disturbed with what we're doing because it is so new and it's so different. And sometimes we have to take on things that we might even involuntarily learn that we're not comfortable with. So one of the things that helps so much is to be in the process, question, reflect. What is sticking at you and why? But the biggest thing is to have empathy. Empathy for yourself and empathy for your kids. Because if you think after years of waiting to be told what to do, how you're worthy by someone else, what grades you need to get and how good you are from that, our first step is to reclaim empathy. That we're entering something new. We're trying on something different. We might be struggling. We might be in that dip, but we're learning. And so are our kids. And if we're feeling a dip, if we're feeling our struggle, our kids might be feeling it also. We would want to give empathy to them, but to ourselves as well. And it's normal. It's normal that we're going to feel resistance from others, some pushback as well. But during a time of change, that's normal because there's social, psychological fear of change that happens. There's a lack of skills. And as we're learning that and building on that, this is a great place to be. When we have community and connection, when we have a sounding board, when we can focus on those emotional bonds and relationships. And the biggest thing about it is healing rifts. And I know we might talk about the literacy thing and the math thing and how they're going to do that in all of this process, but healing those rifts, those emotional, those relationship holes actually takes time in that process. And that's really the foundation for our journey, our learning journey. That's the core foundation for it all. Because what happens with those relationships that might have gaps is trust has been lost. And the trust is not just trust in our kids. Have you heard if you leave your kids to do what they want to choose, they're just going to play video games all day. They're going to waste their day. They're not going to learn how to read. They're not going to learn math. They're not going to learn the things that's expected. They're not going to make good choices. They're not going to take responsibility. You need to tell them what to do. There's no trust. You cannot trust your children. You definitely cannot trust teens. Forget about that as well. Because so what does that mean? Essentially, that also means that you can't trust yourself as well. We're so often told that we can't be trusted as parents even. I love the question. Who are you to think that you can educate your own children? I've got that question so many times in different ways. And I love it because I think first, well, my goal, our goal as a family is to help our kids understand that it's their learning process, that I want them to learn how to do that for themselves and to learn what they love and want and be self-directed. It's not for me, it's for them. And second, who are you to think that you have the right to be the one that I hand my kids over to? My children to you, 5 days a week, how many times, how many hours in a day? Why are you better than me when I'm their parent? We push buttons in this deschooling process and unschooling process, buttons for ourselves and other people. And that's also normal when we're looking at resistance. We have resistance. So part of this process, I guess in a way, I'm maybe kind of giving you a little bit of a checklist. I'm not saying 1, 2, 3, 4, but here's are some things. And if you really want me to number it, I guess I can, but is looking at the resistance and redefining it as well. Reframing the resistance. What's pushing and bothering you? Am I getting to my time, Karima? See, Karima's coming up. Just let me know if I am, and I'll hurry it up and then I'll leave more room for questions. Should I? Okay. So I'll condense it really quickly here. So big.
We have just a few more minutes because I definitely want you to have time for questions. I'm over here taking a page full of notes and I'm like, oh my gosh, Robyn is giving all of the gems and the jewels. Go ahead and make sure that we leave room for questions. And in the background, we're still figuring out those breakout rooms.
Okay. So I'm going to condense it and I'll shorten it up so that you can start asking questions. And I see that some are coming here. So the resistance, we don't always have to run away from it. If, those naysayers, those parents questioning, what are we going to say? What are you doing? We're going to have disagreement, but redefining and reframing that resistance, we might be pushing buttons just in what we're doing. And we're probably most likely pushing our own buttons as well. So having that understanding that there is fear, but also again, that empathy, but again, building the relationships. And actually this deschooling process, this is the key. It's relationships, and relationships. Relationships on this journey is the most important complex part of it. And that's laying the foundation for this journey. We are transforming the way we're doing things. We're learning and trying on new beliefs and understandings. We're building community, connecting, empathizing. We're looking at the ebbs and flows. There's never a checklist, always a complexity. We are slowing down this process because we're all different people at different places, but we're understanding that that also only adds to the complexity. We're recognizing that there's no shortcut, no checklist, that this is a nonlinear, complex process. And relationships is where that's at. So as we move forward, as we're in this flow, if we're looking around our ocean, relationships also connects to that building of trust, which has then been actually the strongest part of where we're going, trusting in ourselves and trusting in our kids. Because we think of the trust as an old Norse word. We think of that Viking, right? When we think of the Norse, the big Viking who's ready to conquer, who's ready to go and discover and also to offer safety, protection, support, and confidence. And, I used to think of it as like we're going into battle. I thought of that Viking and realized that we can actually shift it in that way because it is about protection, but also really about support. It's about being strong as well. We're going into unknown territory. So when we look at that in the reflection of homeschooling or unschooling, we think that we also, that relationship builds confidence for those foreign shores that we're on. We think of it as a role as our parent, where we're protecting and making safe and supporting so that our kids can try things, where they feel safe to make mistakes, where they can ask questions and they can be themselves more as well. And that's really the foundation. So that and slowing down, the slow knowing, which is also the hard part. The trust takes time, but by slowing down the slow knowing, it helps us to cultivate the ability to wait. Because so many times when we want to see those, those levels, those benchmarks, those exams, those grades, In unschooling, it doesn't unfold the way that it does in the linear way. Remember, it doesn't unfold the way it does when the expectations of the classroom. It's going to look different. So having cultivating the ability to wait, to slow down, to make it about the nonlinear process absolutely helps us in this deschooling journey as well. Slow knowing means observing the disturbances and taking time to ask, to process, reflect, and then draw the patterns out of the nonlinear learning lives. It's like the tortoise and the hare. Before we're rushing across the finish line, we're taking the time to slow down and really to understand and know our journey. So I'm going to leave it at that as well, so I can have some space for questions. Thank you very much, everyone. I guess I forgot to tell you that I'm a podcaster, so I can talk a lot and I can talk a little bit more than I planned to. So, so should we get to the first question from Natalia, Karima? Or should I hand it over to you for a moment?
And I understand my audio was a little low. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, great. So yes, I'm gonna, since you're so great at this, Robyn, I'm gonna let you field the questions. We're gonna open the breakout rooms. You're gonna see a pop-up. Please ignore it for right now as we are in the background, making sure that the recording works in the breakout rooms. So Robyn, you go ahead, field the questions. We're still recording. And then at 1:30 is when the next talk begins. Okay, and so I'll come back in at around 1:20 or so to give any further directions if anything else has to be said or done. Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Cool.
All right. So I see Natalia has put in the chat, and Natalia, if it's okay if I just read it out here. Natalia said, I guess for me, the wake-up call this year became how much doing conscious parenting and deschooling, homeschooling, unschooling requires of the parents. Absolutely. Yeah, this is a huge journey for us as parents. Deactivating and unraveling the value and dogma of schooling is difficult and exciting. But at the first time of homeschooling, striving to be unschooling parent, I ended up being the only adult with my kids for 5 days a week. Yeah, that absolutely happened. I realized that all the areas in my life that I knew could use improvement prior to homeschooling became paramount once kids were at home. For example, without having established healthy boundaries, without proper self-care, without repairing cracks in our marriage, it became overwhelming. Amen. Yes, I hear you. I began to see my kids taking on some emotional responsibilities unto themselves, and it produced a huge amount of guilt. When I say the kids are thriving, I mean thriving on emotional, physical, spiritual, social levels. This is a piece of deschooling that I find so extremely challenging and growth producing. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and part of that process and slowing down as well allows us to see the things that sometimes we maybe were a little bit too busy before to see. But the great thing I recommend, and what you said is, you know, you still can have healthy boundaries. It's important. I know sometimes people think unschooling is completely like unparenting. It's this free for all that like is craziness. But you know, you're also still a model. Like the biggest thing I think is instead of teaching and directing, it's modeling as well. So how we're living our life and what we're choosing, even how we're choosing to use our words in so many ways. And it's a practice, and speaking out loud with our kids is part of that process as well. So taking things like self-care is absolutely important. And having that time to work on those relationships. Yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of the journey. That also might mean letting go of some things. So if you've organized 4 days of curriculum, maybe you might want to let go of an hour or two every day of a certain or worksheet. You know, if you might have 3 activities organized in a week, can you let go of a day of one activities where you guys can just slow down and be together? There might be some letting go in order to make space for those bigger, those complex parts of deschooling. Natalia, your hand is up. Did you want to add? Because this is your question in the chat, right? You want to add?
Yes. Well, I wanted to say that the healthy boundaries, so for me, like I've realized this year that I don't have the boundaries, you know, so like, and I could see it being reflected on the kids so profoundly, you know, and so now I'm like, wow, you know.
Sorry, the healthy boundaries, unhealthy boundaries? being
Healthy, well, just I feel like, person's ability to establish, their own healthy boundaries. And then if you're the only adult who's with the kids and you don't know how to do that for yourself, you're right, like you are the person who is modeling it for them. So if you can't model it for them, then so we actually we do not do worksheets or activities. It sort of became a free-for-all. But I see that my kids obviously gravitated a lot more towards gaming, because that was, which was difficult because they actually had very varied interests, and I'm sure they still have them. It's just kind of took, anyway, this part has been very difficult for me, and it's almost making me want to regroup for a little while before I continue on the journey, because anyway, it feels really chaotic, I suppose.
Okay. So one
Yeah.
thing, it's absolutely okay to regroup. Don't feel like you're failing or you're not doing things right. If you need to take that space, absolutely, that's essential. And I hope everyone understands that sometimes you need to have that space or that time in order to kind of recalibrate as well, and to have space for that reflection time too. Sometimes it might mean someone coming for the day so that you can have that space. I relied when we were living in places where we had close friends or even family, because we weren't always in those spaces or places, I relied on family to come and help me out, to take the kids for a day. When we weren't in places, when we used to live in South Korea, and so we lived there more than once. So we did have good friends. So I had a friend who had a teenage daughter who came to babysit sometimes, because I was just like, I need a little bit of time, and she was happy to come babysit. Just also taking those moments where it's you're away and you can have that space is important as well too, for sure. So regrouping is okay. And if you need to do that, certainly do that for sure. There was a comment added to that, Natalia. It may not seem like it, but deschooling, unschooling is a perfect place to regroup. Oh, there we go. In all the areas you mentioned. Once you realize that this new journey is a lifestyle and not just a learning style, you will free yourself of the measurements that restrict you. I encourage you to embrace the flow in all its chaos and trust that you and your family will not be led astray. Instead, you will find a world that is personalized to your needs, wants, desires, and purpose. Hugs to you, dear. You're doing an amazing job. Absolutely. I agree. Thank you so much, Karen. That's a great, great ad. Everyone here is doing an amazing job, and thank you for being here today and asking these questions. So the next question is, are there any benchmarks? I mean, for us and for our kids, what are the clues that we can use to feel confident that we are moving in a healthy direction? Benchmarks. I don't have any benchmarks to give you, like any written or formed benchmarks. The confidence that you feel, my confidence might be very different from your confidence. So I don't know how I would measure that for you. That I think part of that is that process is understanding your own measurements for that. And then understanding maybe when you're in a certain place, if you're not feeling that, going backwards and thinking, okay, what has let me off the path, and where can I shift and change and be redirected to go? I think the benchmarks, and this is the one thing I'm talking about, relationships. There's going to be times where you're doing what's working, but we're not going to be happy 100% of the time. You're just, it's a natural part of life. Again, the ebbs and flows. You can feel joy, contentment. We can feel contentment, but there's sometimes when my kids don't have to be jumping off the wall excited all the time for me to feel like things are going well. I have a daughter who's turning 13 very soon. And all of those other natural physical things that have been happening for a few years, that changes ebbs and flows of how she's communicating and feeling. And I have my son who's almost 16, there'll be times where he'll be a bit more quiet than he usually is. And I think for something like a benchmark for us, I just want my kids to know that they have a space to come to communicate and to share when they need to, when they're ready. And it might not be when I want them to, but sometimes for me, that's also stepping back and just saying, if you want to talk, I'm here. And if there's anything that you want to share, I'm absolutely here as well. So it's just still building those relationships, and you would know maybe what needs to be built on those relationships as well. so that you're moving in a healthy direction. Usually if I'm, things are really not going well though, that's my benchmark. If I'm feeling like stressed, so tired, miserable in some way, then maybe my benchmark is like, okay, something needs to shift. There's something that needs to shift as well. So the next is my question as well, Jasmine. Okay, I have 3 boys, 17, 2, and 1. Wow, that's a big range of ages. Trying to teach my younger boys society's educational standards while not being so rigid. Okay, society's educational standards. I guess my question to you is, I think I live in Alberta, Canada, and the educational standards here are going to be pretty different from the educational standards of maybe somebody, and I'm guessing from Atlanta, Georgia, or even Jamaica. Like my dad is here, so I know I've gone to school in Jamaica. The educational standards are different there. Society, I'm guessing, what could you maybe share what kind of standards you're asking about? Are you talking about standards of basic reading and writing? Or what else? Because that is going to fluctuate depending where you are as well. I think that's one thing to remember. We think that there has to be this one set curriculum and things to do, but depending where you are, that's going to change for sure. And that's not always actually going to be a standard as well. I think the biggest things with this journey, especially if you're self-directed learning and unschooling, is helping our kids to understand that they can still, if there's a standard that they want or need, how they can help to define it for themselves and then seek it out and obtain it as well for themselves. That's going to take them really, really far. So for example, my kids, I'll use my son as an example. If I'm going to put, he would be like grade 10 age, he probably wouldn't meet those academic standards that the kids in grade 10 here at this school have. He might be beyond some for sure, but he might be well below some others. That's just the way, that's where he's at right now. I'm absolutely fine with that. And I wouldn't push him to meet those standards because the life that he lives now is really his own. And I know he is learning immensely all the time. And the way that he learns does not look like the school classroom. He's very hands-on. He's very if you know anything about, if you've had a chance to listen to what my son's doing and where he's going with things he wants to do, he's already working and living out what he wants to, like wildlife and the outdoors and things like that. So it's not going to look at all like a classroom or a test. It's very different from that. But at the same time, I see him fully in his element and in his joy, and what he understands and knows, maybe on a science level, because he lives in it, would far exceed any standards that would be in that area. But is he a great writer? Absolutely no. Has he ever written an essay? No, he's actually never written an essay in his life. And here's the irony of all, and I think he's going to be okay. It's not going to be totally needed for him right now. And he says, if I need to learn how to write an essay, I'll learn how to write an essay. There's so many ways that I can do that if I need to do that as well. So Alexa said, I'm in North Carolina. They're supposed to learn ABCs, numbers, shapes, colors, etc. by age 3. Wow. And all by age 5 or starting kindergarten. Holy cow. Okay, wrap up in 5 minutes. Okay. I'm a pre-K teacher and I have 3 5-year-olds that will be starting kindergarten, can't count to 10. Meanwhile, my 2-year-old in June can count to 20, knows all shapes and letters. Okay. Trying not to pressure my boys into meeting the standards and being okay with that. All right. I guess, honestly, Alexis, I think probably you're pressuring yourself a lot right now. I'm going to be honest. I hope that, are you sending your kids to school? Is that why you feel that they need to have those standards of kindergarten and pre-K? If you're looking at unschooling and homeschooling, you are not bound by those standards. Yes, if you're sending your kid, is that a yes that you're sending your kids to school? Here's the other thing. There's many ways that you can share the learning, curiosity, and joy and experiences by the environment that you're creating in your home. One would be, modeling. If you want reading and writing, reading yourself, reading out loud that are not worksheets or not textbooks, listening to stories, dramatic play, talking about stories, relating to characters that you watched in a movie, playing dress up, and just letting your kids, you know, your kids want to tell you all the stories of the things they've experienced and the characters they want to create and what they built. Let them talk about that for as long as they can and ask questions. All of that is building those foundations of literacy as well, those ABCs, numbers, shapes, and colors. In art, going outside in nature, collecting things that you see outside, talking about the sky, talking about the flowers that are blossoming, why it's such a beautiful red, why you love the color yellow. A lot of those things that we're worried about standards, actually, especially when they're so young, happen in our natural conversations of life. They happen as we live. They're not actually removed. It's not the classroom that you need in order to get them. They happen within our daily life, and everybody is going to be at a different level. I'm going to say Karima and I, probably when we were both 3, 5, and 10, we were at a different level from each other. My brother and I, very different. My kids, very different. I see it within our own family, how we're at different spaces. And I think probably the practice is honoring those spaces and asking why those standards are so, so important to you. And will the world be over if they don't meet them at that exact time? What else could it mean for your kids if we support them where they are right now with that joy and curiosity? If your child wants to dig a hole in the dirt and they're fascinated by what they're finding in that, how can we support them with the worms and the dirt and the mud and the clay and talk about all that they're discovering there, because that's still a huge part of learning. How can we, it's actually up to us as parents, start to shift in our idea of what learning is and how we can support them in that natural process. And I mean, I know you're going to talk about that more this week in Karima. There's so many ways. That's the thing. There's so many rabbit holes that we can go down to as well. So, but reach out. I think you, my email I can leave, and you can DM me through my website as well for further conversations and questions. I'll hand it over to you.
Robyn, before you go, everyone click on that reactions button and then give Robyn some love for this talk that she just gave you. She just gave you the keys to the kingdom. Follow her. She put her her email address in the chat. Follow her podcast. Join her club on Clubhouse. She always brings the thunder. She always brings the real and the raw. What I got from what you shared, Robyn, I'll share briefly because we do have some housekeeping announcements. What I got was the story that you told about your daughter when she fell and hurt her chin, right? I was that mom. My kids will be laying on the sofa, horizontal like this with a fever. And I'm the one with the textbook. Like, well, can you read it like laying down sideways like that, right? Here's your pen. You know, just go ahead and fill in the workbook.
Yeah, while they're in their uniforms.
While they're in their uniform.
My more kids wear uniforms to school, but I get you when you talk about their homeschool uniforms. I get it, because I love those uniforms too. Yes.
But it is that idea of unraveling, right? Unraveling this previous notion. And we talk about getting to nothing and what that feels like. So Robyn laid the groundwork for all of us to consider, what is life like without those check boxes? What is life like when it's you and your kid, and you are really just looking at your children and they become the curriculum? So Robyn, my good girlfriend.
Thank you, Karima.
Thank you so much for kicking us off for our time today. So listen, friends, I told y'all, we're going to do this in the spirit of fun, connection, and full self-expression. Fun, connection, full self-expression. So in order for that to happen, we're going to take a little intermission. Despite the best laid plans of mice and men, we did all of this work beforehand. I've used Zoom a gazillion times, like the rest of us during the pandemic. I'm going to stop recording right now. And all of the sudden, the